Hi everyone, we're going to be getting going in just a few moments. We're just waiting for everyone to join in, so we'll be starting shortly. And if you're just joining us now, we're going to just wait a few more seconds and then we're going to get kicked off. All right, I think we can start. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the AI Visibility Action Plan. This is a three-part webinar series, and in part one, we learned about how AI search works and why it matters for your brand. And this is part two, the AI Visibility Playbook. My name is Alex Kornberg. I am a marketing lead here at Trustpilot, and I'll be your MC once again. So before we get going, just want to let you know of two things. First off, after this webinar runs, we will be sharing the link to the recording so you can rewatch at your leisure. And second, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of this session as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to click that Q&A button and pop them in there, and we will try to get to them as soon as we can. So with that, I can pass it to our speaker for today. Once again, his name is Justin Catroni. He is the Director of Product Evangelism and Customer Education here at Trustpilot. So Justin, I will pass it along to you.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm super excited to talk about AI visibility and some tips and tricks to stay visible in AI. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and go over our agenda for today. We're going to start by talking about content strategy and how we can develop an AI-ready content strategy for a business. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to structure pages and the actual content in HTML. We'll talk a little bit about schema, and we'll also touch on a few other topics that help businesses stay visible in AI. So a lot to cover. I'm going to move at a pretty brisk pace, but I think you'll be able to keep pace with me. Now, real quickly, I wanted to go over something we talked about in our last webinar, where we touched on what we call the 3 R's. And these are 3 pillars to stay visible in AI search: relevance, ranking, and recency. Relevance is all about creating content that is relevant or aligned with the questions that people ask AI systems. Ranking is about validating and corroborating the claims that you make so that AI systems know you're talking about the truth. And the last one is recency, and that's all about having fresh content because AI systems like fresh content. And as we go through today and we talk about how to stay visible, we're going to weave in the content story related to relevance, ranking, and recency. Now, we'll start with broader strategy, right? Like, let's think about content strategy and how do we develop a content strategy that's going to stay durable in this new time of AI visibility. And a great way to anchor any strategy is to think about the customer, right? Think about the user. And we've been talking about user journeys forever as businesses, right? Where people go through a conversion funnel, right? It starts at the top where they try to understand some topic or idea, and then they might be evaluating different options, and ultimately they have to decide and convert, right? And so all of these phases of the user journey introduce certain questions, and that's really where we want to anchor our content strategy, is questions along this journey, right? Because people are going to AI and they're asking questions. And so we want to make sure that we are answering those questions that they are proposing to AI systems. We want to map them back to this journey. And ultimately, we want to create clear, direct, and complete answers. Now, we're not just talking about text. We're also talking about different formats like video and images. And we'll touch on that in a minute. So let's go through the different phases and think about, like, what are people going through? What are they asking at different parts of this funnel? So at the top of the funnel, when they're trying to understand something, they're probably asking broad questions. What is this all about? Why does this matter? How do these things work? What are different options within this topic? And how should I be thinking of it, right? And so really broad topical questions that people ask. And in these cases, AI systems are looking for clear explanations. They're looking for educational type of content that they can use and that they can resource as they create answers. So things that are conceptual, right? Things that will ground people in ideas, things like definitions and frameworks. And if we think about content types that might excel, they might be like concept overview pages, they might be explainer videos, they might be how-to guides, or they might be pages on our website about like what you need to know about a certain topic, right? So again, not about specific brands, not about buying now, right? Topical information that's meant to help them understand a topic or category of information before they start to move into the next phase. And that phase is all about evaluation, right? And so now people are getting a little bit more defined in their thinking. They're looking at specific things and comparing things, right? And so here they're asking questions about like, what option is best for me? What features are best for me? Are there any trade-offs that I need to be thinking of? How do these options compare? And what do people like me choose, right? AI is amazing because you can give it a lot of information and it can customize an answer for you. And so you have to think that all of these different people that are interested in your business are going to ask things in slightly different ways, right? And so it's really remarkable to think about the variety of things that people will ask. But they're going to ask about customization and all of those types of things. And that introduces the opportunity to answer more types of questions. And so in this phase, AI systems are looking for things that help them compare and contrast information, right? Remember, AI systems are not some database full of comparing different products. They need to go out and they need to find those comparisons. They need to find those pieces of content that list the pros and cons of different things. What's important for us as marketers, as we build out content, is to have a clear point of view and talk about things definitively to help guide people as they compare things. And anytime we can work in real life evidence or reviews or real feedback from real people, that's really important, right? Because AI systems can't synthesize real feedback from humans. And so people explaining why they chose certain things, that can really help in this phase of things. So what formats work well here? Comparison pages, right? Maybe pages with tables of data comparing different products or services. FAQs, right? Frequently asked questions, super, super helpful here. Use cases, right? Like explaining how a product or a service can provide a solution for somebody and solve their problem. And customer stories, again, having people explain their experience with a product or two products, comparing them, can be really helpful at this phase of the journey. And then ultimately, when people get to the bottom part of that funnel, when they're trying to decide on something, they're probably looking to assess risk, right? They want to feel comfortable. They want to make sure they're making the right decision. Now, when we used to use traditional search, and obviously we still do, but in those cases, we would build up the trust ourselves. We'd click on links, we'd read content, we'd go back and forth until we trusted our decision. And now AI systems will do that. So they're looking for that information that will help them assess risk. They're looking for reviews. They're looking for feedback that helps people answer the question, can I trust this, right? And so again, AI systems are looking for credibility. They're looking to clear information about any objections people might have about brands or specific products. And they're looking for consistency across sources. The cool thing about AI is it doesn't go to one place, pull out some content, and take that as verbatim the final solution, right? They're going to look across lots of different sources of information in order to validate their answers. And this is actually what we talk about as ranking in our 3 R's. And so what kind of formats would be helpful at this phase of the funnel? Well, we're looking at things like testimonials, right? Like people telling their story. We're looking about credibility pages or other types of trust signals. Maybe pages about what to expect when you become a customer, right? What's that experience like? And obviously reviews are very, very helpful at this stage because again, they are a real human voice talking about a product or a service, right? And so that can build a lot of credibility and help these AI systems validate other information that they've gotten. So as we kind of come to the bottom of the funnel here and we think about, structuring our content, think about that user journey, think about all of the questions that come up and use that as an anchor, right? Use that as a starting point when you're thinking about the content. Now, as you go through, it's also important to think about what we call fan out, right? And this is not a new concept. It was something we've been talking about for a while. But fan out is planning for additional content, additional topics that support and help answer the questions that people might have, right? Because these AI systems, they just don't kind of go out, ask one question, and then construct an answer for users. They actually broaden the topic, right? They look at different things and they look for additional information for the answer that they're creating, right? And so they're trying to anticipate what the user might ask next, right? And so they're trying to look at additional related topics, related questions to what a user's asking. And so we need to be thinking about what are the topics related to the buying journey? What are the topics related to the questions that come up during that journey? And we need to architect and create our content for that. Now, obviously, in the world of SEO, we've been creating adjacent content, and this is similar, right? We want to be thinking about obviously focusing on a core topic, but we want to connect a lot of the answers to that topic. We want to think about clusters of topics that are complementary. We'll get into an example in a minute about how this might apply to a real business. But it's not just about one question or one topic. It's about that whole holistic view of information that supports a business, that supports the entire customer journey. So we want to make sure that we have coverage for topics across the entire journey, whether it's upper funnel when they're trying to understand a topic, or down at the bottom of that funnel where they're trying to actually make a decision. And we also need to think about the format of that content, right? Now, obviously, content is king, and text is right up there as one of the most important pieces of content. But things like video are absolutely critical. And if you haven't, I'm sure everyone here has used Google's AI overview. You ask some questions and they'll literally embed the video right there where they're extracting the answer to your question. And so having a multimodal content strategy is equally important. Thinking about video at that upper funnel phase for understanding, thinking about video at that middle phase for evaluating, and obviously at the bottom of the funnel when deciding is really, really important. Images are super helpful too, especially when you're trying to explain new concepts or ideas. Different types of infographics or visuals can be very helpful. And we all know that AI systems can consume all of this information and turn it into answers. And so it's important for all of us to be thinking about this multimodal approach to content creation along the entire customer journey, focusing on all of those questions that are going to come up. Now, that's kind of a lot. So maybe let's look at a real life example of how might we approach this for a real customer journey. And let's talk about maybe buying a DSLR camera, right? The fancy cameras, not the stuff we use on our phone, the ones with removable lenses and all of the fancy features that you can control. Now, these can be very, very expensive. So the journey requires a lot of information, right? People are probably doing a lot of research, especially if they're new to photography, especially if they want to up their game. And so let's go through and use this as an example for all of the stuff we just talked about. So at the top of the funnel, right, taking the leap, people are probably going to want to understand, what am I buying, right? Like, why do I need to be thinking about a DSLR? What is the difference between different types of DSLR cameras? What's a mirrorless camera? What's a DSLR camera? Do I really need this, right? What is aperture? What is ISO? What are all of these things that have to do with photography that I might not know anything about? Now, if we think about kind of the fan out in this area, the users might be asking about, hey, I want to get into wildlife photography, or I want to take portraits of my children, right? Other topics that are upper funnel about photography that are important for us to cover, because again, that variety of prompts, that variety of questions that people are asking AI search engines, it's pretty vast. It's really big. So we want to cover all of those different things. So here I'm thinking about creating plain language explainers for the different types of photography. I'm thinking about talking about all of the different features, the core concepts of photography, about aperture, about light, about shutter speed. I'm thinking about guides. I'm thinking about educational overviews. And again, if we're selling cameras, maybe, beginner's guide to digital cameras, right? Like all of these things that touch on different topics, but are generalized, right? And about just kind of understanding the area. Now, as people move through this whole journey and they start to think about different options, they maybe are kind of understanding, all right, I definitely want to do wildlife photography. I definitely want to, take close-ups of certain animals, right? So now they might be looking at the pros and cons of different cameras. They might be looking at the different feature sets of different brands. They might be wondering which ones have better software, Canon or Sony cameras, right? So they might now be getting into different brands, different models, specific features, and doing a lot more comparison type of prompting, right? And so here I'm thinking about, am I creating comparison pages? Do I have tables of data that compare different cameras at different price ranges? Do I talk about the pros and cons of different brands and in different features? And do I have use cases, right? Before I mentioned that maybe someone wants to get into wildlife photography, do I have content about that specific use case and what to think about, what features are important or what brands historically have done well in that area? People are probably asking the question, what's the best camera for wildlife photography? What's the best camera for portrait photography? Do I have content that is clear, accessible, and easy to understand for those pieces of information, right? And then obviously at the bottom of the funnel, when we get to making decisions, right, someone will probably figure it out like, okay, this is what I want to do. I know I want a Sony. I'm going to use it for maybe blogging. I know I want these lenses, right? They want security. They want to mitigate risk, like we talked about before. And so they're going to want to have information that will help them feel confident in their decision, right? And it's not only about maybe the specific product or the specific brand, but also the vendor, right? Am I buying from a reputable place? DSLR cameras aren't very inexpensive. And so you want to make sure that the customer, has a warm feeling and is confident when they're making that decision. And so here at this bottom part of the funnel, reviews, right, are super, super helpful, right? Reviews are real human information, right? It's qualitative feedback about a business experience. That is critical, right? That cannot be generated artificially. Having that is really, really useful. And then information about like what to expect after you buy, right? Like what's the shipping experience like? What's the support experience like? Is there an onboarding experience? Maybe there's an online course that comes with it or, is offered. Information about all of these things is helpful. But really at this part of the funnel, it's about creating that confidence and helping people build that trust in the vendor and in the brand so that they feel confident in making that decision. So hopefully, that gives you kind of a concrete example of this whole process and thinking about the funnel, thinking about different types of content, and architecting fan out to really be able to make sure you're covering all of the different topics that might come up. Now, obviously, we talked about creating a lot of content, right? And one of the great use cases for AI is creating content. It could be obviously the written word, it can be videos, it can be images. AI is unbelievable at cranking out content. And I highly encourage people to use AI to create content. But I think there's a right way and a wrong way to use AI in this application, right? We don't want to just create slop. We don't want to create content for content's sake, right? We want to create like real human perspective. We want to create credibility, and the nuances of how we create content as humans is important, right? So it's important to go back, read everything, make sure it's in your voice, make sure it's in your tone, make sure it represents you and your brand accurately. And we always want to be using AI to assist and not just to mass produce. And so really think about this at a very deep level because, I think like with any technology, there's going to be blowback, right? And people are going to be thinking about the quality of the content, and we don't want them to mistrust you or any business, right? So use AI, but use it in the right way. Okay, so let's move on now to think about like how do we format all of this information? How do we actually construct this content, right? And as I mentioned, we're writing for AI, but a lot of the things that we do are similar to what we do for humans, right? We want to make sure that we're creating clear content. We want to make sure it's organized easily in a way that's easy to follow. We want to make sure things are quick, concise, and easy to understand. And we don't want to be ambiguous, right? So there's really no big secret to it. We want to create good quality content. Now, in terms of formatting that content, the way that we lay out our HTML, there are some nuances, right? Because when we talk about reducing ambiguity in terms of a machine reading our content, it's slightly different. So we want to do basic things like make sure that our titles and our H1 tags are aligned, right? Make sure they're saying the same thing. Make sure they're connected, right? And they're not completely disparate, right? And your title tag says one thing and your H1 tag says another thing. Make sure there's alignment there. Another thing to do is like try to think about using real user questions as headings in your content, right? We talked about FAQ pages being really useful, especially during the evaluation phase and in the understanding phase as well. But think about using those real questions that people ask as headings. This makes it really explicit and easy to understand for AI systems when they're scanning that content. If they see the question that they're actually trying to answer, that's a great signal to them that, hey, this content is really, really useful. So using questions as headers, super, super helpful. And then when you have the answer for that question, lead with that answer, right? Again, don't get ambiguous, don't ramble on, answer the question quickly and clearly. Again, these systems, these AI systems need to return an answer fast. So the sooner you can show them that you're answering the question quickly, the better you are. Another great way to think about content formatting is tables. We talked about the evaluation stage, people doing comparisons between products and services and features. Tables are a great way to show the relationship between pieces of information, right? And so, again, these systems, these technologies are going to consume and they want to compare. And anything we can do to format our information easier and a better way to make it easier for them to consume it is going to be really, really helpful for them. Now, as we talk about formatting the actual pages, formatting the actual content, one of the most important ways is actually to use schema. And, you know, schema is nothing new. I think everyone here has probably heard of it or even used it. But schema is a system, right? It's a standardized, machine-readable way to make information consumable by automated systems, right? And so we've been using schema for a while as we have been building out websites. There are lots of different types of schema, right? There's schema for articles. There's schema for products. There's schema for FAQs. There's schema for blog posts. There's schema for how-to content. The value of schema is the standardized format of the information. Because again, these systems are going to come out. These systems are going to ask for information. And if you put it in a format that's machine specific, like schema is machines, like specific for machines, they're going to be able to know exactly what it is really, really quickly. Now, obviously, schema is not visible to people, so you don't have to worry about that. But highly, highly recommend that you implement schema. And you may already have schema implemented. There are very simple tools out there to test your site. And a lot of today's most modern platforms like Wix, WordPress, Shopify, they support schema natively, where you click a button and you can turn it on and off. But highly recommend investigating if you're currently using schema. And if you're not, I think that's definitely a place that you want to focus on making some improvements. Now, as we continue to move through ways to think about, you know, influencing these AI tools, let's touch briefly on recency and ranking, okay? Now, the first thing we need to make sure is that all of these AI systems are visible, or your site is visible to them, right? And in the SEO world, we always talked about making sure Googlebot, making sure all of the crawlers can access your site. Well, all of these AI systems have different types of bots and crawlers that scan over content. Some do it to collect information for training. Some do it in real time to answer questions. But the first thing you want to do is make sure these systems have access to your content, because if they don't, you're invisible to them. So first and foremost, make sure of that. Now, the next thing you want to think about is once you're visible, you want to make sure that your content is recent, right? And so, you know, in terms of recency, Google and Bing have given us some explicit instructions. Like in the Google world, right, you can actually tell it when you update your site. You know, when you update a page, you can go and tell it you updated one page, or you could submit a request to have it come scan your entire site. Now, we're kind of at their whim, right? Like when they want to come out, and last I checked their developer docs, it can be a few days or a week, I think, between how often they crawl. With Bing, you can use one of their things called Index Now, which you can actually implement Index Now, and it will allow you to tell them when you update your content, which is great. And they love that. They love to have you tell them so that their information is always fresh and is always up to date. So the other thing is, as you're updating your website, right, as you're building out your own content, making sure that you're, adding information at a good clip, whether it's blog posts or pages. Again, being thoughtful about the content you create, making sure it's completely aligned, right? Topics that align with the customer journey, topics and content that answer the questions that people have. That's important. But making sure that you are at a fairly often pace. It doesn't have to be every day or every hour, but you have a regular publishing schedule that you're pushing out information there. Now, the other thing we want to touch on is ranking. Again, when we talk about the 3 R's, there's recency, relevance, ranking, and recency. Ranking is important. And in this case, ranking is really all about corroboration and validation, right? And when we think about content, and in fact, when we think about a lot of the things that we talked about here, we talked about a lot of the owned content, right? Creating content about that funnel, things that you own, right? It could be videos, it could be text, but you're owning it. It's your website, it's your product pages, it's your FAQs. And there's a third-party ecosystem, that content that can exist as well. That can be reviews that exist on other sites. It could also be other types of media, affiliates. It could be in communities, right? And so it's important to understand those types of content as well that don't live on your website. That's a little bit more out of your control, because those are important, right? Those AI systems are going to use those for validation about the information that you publish. And so we find, obviously, we think reviews are a really, really important part of that whole system. Reviews allow you to collect real user feedback about their experience with your product, about your service, that corroborates information that you create. And the great thing about reviews is that if you automate review collection, if you're regularly collecting reviews, those reviews are fresh, they're recent, and they're relevant. They talk about the entire customer journey. So think about reviews as an important part of your overall content strategy. Okay, we've covered a lot of stuff. We've covered a lot of ground. We've covered a lot of topics. Let's try to sum this up in a few points. We started by talking about aligning content to the full customer journey, right? Think about the questions people are asking at those different phases. Think about the information that you have to answer those questions. Thinking about structure that content, right? Think about making sure your title tags are aligned with H1. Thinking about you're using questions as headings. Think about writing direct, simple answers, things that people can understand, right? And also when we're thinking about content, think about depth, right? Thinking about that fan out, making sure you're covering topics that are related to it. Now, it's a lot of information. Schema can really help here, because using schema, it makes it easy for AI systems to understand exactly all that information you're using out there. Lots of different types of schema. So whether it's product pages, blog pages, articles, how-tos, there's a schema for all of those things. Make sure you're using schema. And also, as we mentioned, reviews, a great way to have fresh content that validates all those claims that you're making about your brand and your business. So we covered a lot. As Alex mentioned, you can go back and watch this. This is part of a series. In our first webinar, we talked about kind of the trends in AI search, what's happening, how it works. Obviously, today we got a lot more tactical. We talked about creating content and some of the things that you can do tactically to make sure that you're visible. And in our next webinar, we're going to talk about Trustpilot a little bit more, how to use that product, and we're going to talk about AI visibility metrics, which I'm really, really excited about. And we'll talk about how to use some of those. And with that, I'm going to bring Alex back and ask him if we've gotten any questions.
Thank you. Yes, we do have some questions, and thanks everyone for submitting them. They are fantastic. So I've just picked out a few. This first one is, how long does it typically take for an AI engine to see the formatting changes we make to our site?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, again, these AI systems, when they need information, they go out in real time and they get it, right? And we talked about this in webinar one, where you can see citations within answers. And so we know that they're going out, we know that they're collecting information in real time. So it could be as quick as real time, or it could be, a couple of days, depending on when they crawl sites. A lot of it depends on site popularity and things like that. But again, we're seeing these systems retrieve information in real time to answer questions, so it could be pretty fast.
Got it. Thank you. This next question is, can FAQ schema help us get cited even if we currently don't rank well in search?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, AI search visibility is a lot like search engine visibility, right? There's no silver bullet. You're not going to make one change and automatically appear in every AI answer. There are a lot of things that we do, and collectively they all add up and they all make us visible. And so, schema is one of those things, right? Like it's absolutely going to help. It's absolutely something you're going to look for. You should check and implement, but it's not the only thing, right? So it's also about creating good, high quality content. It's content that's useful. It's aligned with what the user needs. It's multimodal, and collectively, all of these things will help. So will FAQ schema help? Yes, and it is one thing that should be part of your broader strategy.
Thanks. And this one's semi-related. Does the content need to be long form?
It's another good question, right? And, I think it kind of depends on the content, right? And so we mentioned a couple of things. So first is answering user questions. And so FAQ content, super helpful because it's got the question, use it as a heading, make it really visible. And then we, suggest having the answer right after it. It's super clear. It's super easy. If you can make it concise, great. Question, answer, AI system finds what it wants, uses it and answer. It's great. Now, topical content, as we think about fanning out, that might be a little bit more long form, right? If you're trying to explain the core concepts of photography, whether it's, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, right? Talking about light and how important it is, right? You can't just maybe get that into a sound bite. It might be necessary to have a little bit more longer format content for that. But in general, it kind of depends on what you're trying to build. So, think about what's your end goal here and create the right content for the right reason.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I think that is all the time we have for questions. If you like this session, here is a QR code. You can take out your phone and scan it. You'll find the recording for webinar 1, and in due time, we will add the recording for this webinar and eventually webinar 3. So feel free to bookmark that, save it. You can rewatch anytime you like. And that is all. So hope you enjoyed the session. Justin, thank you for sharing your expertise once again. We hope to see you next time at the ROI of Trust in AI Search. That is the final in our webinar series, and we're excited to see you there. Thank you.